Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
If you stay in one place long enough, you become scenery. That's what I tell the med students now when they come out to do their rural rotations, all fresh sneakers and big city confidence. They'll stand in the doorway of my clinic, look out at the two-block main street, the feed store, the diner with the eternal special, meatloaf sign, and the mountains stretching blue and white past all of it, and they'll say things like, "Wow, it's so quiet." It's not quiet, I tell them. It's just that you're finally hearing things that aren't car horns and sirens. Anyway, I guess I should introduce myself. My name's Eli Turner. I'm 48 now, have been the town doctor in our little corner of Montana longer than some of my patients have been alive. We're about an hour and change from Bozeman, depending on whether you measure distance by miles or by winter. If you plug us into a GPS, it gets confused and starts suggesting hiking trails. I wasn't born here, but it feels like it. I came out right after residency, intending to do 2 years of service in a rural clinic, pay off some loans, and then go chase a respectable job in the city where they have 6 different Thai restaurants and you can get a latte at midnight. That was 20 years ago. The thing about small towns is, they sneak up on you. One day you're the new doctor, the guy people squint at suspiciously because you don't pronounce the river's name right. Then you treat a kid's broken arm at 2 in the morning, drive an old rancher with chest pain through a blizzard because the ambulance can't get through, and sit with Mrs. Jensen while her husband of 57 years slips away, and somewhere in there, you stop being the new anything and start being our doc. That's what they started calling me. Our doc. At the grocery store, at the high school games, at the feed store when I went in pretending I knew what to buy for a chicken I never ended up getting. People would wave and shout, "Hey, doc." And I'd turn around, still surprised they meant me. And I loved it. The work, the people, the way the mountains looked different every morning. I liked trading the constant hum of city life for the sound of wind and cows and the occasional snowplow. I liked that I knew my patients' dogs' names and their favorite pies. I loved it even more because for a long time, I thought I had the perfect partner in it, my wife, Molly. Molly grew up in Helena. We met in college, she was the one in the back of the lecture hall correcting the professor on his statistics, and I was the guy trying to look like I understood biochemistry while quietly panicking. She had this laugh that made people in the next room curious. We got married in a courthouse with bad fluorescent lighting and big promises. When I told her I wanted to go be a country doctor, she didn't flinch. "Out where the stars are big and the coffee's terrible?" she said. "Sure. Someone's gotta keep you from freezing to death." She was my partner in every sense. At first, when we moved, she did everything, set up the house, answered the phone at the clinic, brought coffee into exam rooms when people had been waiting too long. She learned who belonged to what ranch faster than I did. When Mrs. Lawson brought in her 3 howling toddlers, Molly would swoop in with stickers and a story, and somehow the chaos turned into a giggle. "She's a keeper," patients would tell me when Molly ducked out of the room. "You're a lucky man, doc." "I know," I'd say. And I meant it. For years, that's how I told our story, small-town doc and his loyal wife, saving lives and making casseroles, fixed in place like one of those sepia photos in the diner. Then, slowly, the light shifted. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody turns 35, looks at the mountains, and announces, "I am now dissatisfied." It was more like the way winter creeps in here, suddenly you realize it's dark at 4:30 and you can't remember when that started. Molly got restless. She started making comments about the dust. "Do you ever notice how everything here is coated in a layer of dirt?" she'd say, flicking a finger across the mantel. "Even inside." "It's a ranch town," I'd say. "Dirt's our second crop." She stared at the mudroom, at my boots, at the jackets with hay stuck to them. "I miss clean shoes," she murmured. "And restaurants where you don't know the owner's medical history." She began spending more time in Bozeman. At first it made sense, she picked up some part-time work at a boutique, then at a little marketing firm, just to keep my brain from melting, she said. I couldn't argue with that. Living with me, half the conversation was about blood pressure and cattle injuries. "It's just a couple days a week," she'd say, grabbing her bag. Then I'll come back and be your small-town nurse again." "You're not my nurse," I'd say. "You're my boss." She'd smile, but it had an edge. Over time, a couple days turned into most of the week. She'd leave before dawn Monday, come back late Wednesday, then it was Thursday, then sometimes not until Friday night when I was already asleep in the chair with a chart on my chest. "You could come with me," she'd say occasionally. "We could have dinner in a place with actual linen napkins." "I've got patients," I'd answer. "Jimmy's chemo, Mrs. Hanley's wound check, those kids with the flu." "There are doctors in Bozeman," she'd say under her breath. I ignore that. You'd think, being a doctor and all, that I'd be good at noticing symptoms early. But I can diagnose a heart murmur across the room and still miss the sound of my own marriage wheezing. The first real jolt came from a direction I did not expect, a chatty patient with a sinus infection. She was in her 40s, one of those women who can talk for 10 minutes about the weather and somehow make it interesting. I just finished listening to her lungs and was writing a prescription when she said, "Hey, Doc? Funny thing, I think I saw Molly in Bozeman last week." I looked up. "Oh yeah? She's up there a lot these days. Did you say hi?" "Well, I didn't get a chance," the patient said, shifting on the exam table. "She was on the other side of Maine, and I was late for my hair appointment. But she looked great. New coat, big scarf. And that fella she was with, phew." She laughed, not unkindly. "At first I thought it was you, then I realized he was too tall. And he didn't move like someone who drives Highway 89 all winter, you know?" I forced my pen to keep moving. "Someone she works with, probably," I said. "She's doing some consulting up there." "Sure," the patient said. "They sure looked close." He had his hand on her back like they were going somewhere special. "Oh. I'm sorry, I shouldn't gossip. You know how this town is." "Uh-huh," I said, finishing the script. "Twice a day for 10 days. And plenty of fluids." After she left, the clinic felt suddenly too quiet. The humming of the old refrigerator in the break room, the ticking of the wall clock, even the wind rattling the window, all of it got louder. I told myself it was nothing. People see things. They misinterpret. It's Bozeman, everybody walks around touching backs and drinking lattes. It doesn't mean anything. That night, when Molly called to say she was staying one more night in the city because the roads looked bad, I said, "How was Bozeman?" "Same as always," she replied. "Cold and full of trust fund kids in Patagonia jackets." "Why?" "Just wondering if you ran into anyone we know." She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "Nope," she said. "Why?" "No reason," I said, and we both pretended that was true. A week later, when she was finally home, we sat at the kitchen table. The mountains were visible out the window, just a dark line under a brighter sky. She was checking something on her phone. I was trying to read lab results and failing. "Hey, Mole?" I said. She answered without looking up. "Who's the guy?" She looked up then, slowly. "What guy?" "The one you were with in Bozeman," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Woman in town said she saw you. Tall, not me, hand on your back." I figured I'd ask the source. Her mouth tightened. "Are we really doing this?" she said. "You're taking gossip from Mrs. Sinus infection as evidence?" "I'm asking you a question," I replied. "You can answer it or not. But if there's something I should know." She dropped the phone on the table and stood up, pacing to the sink and back like she was trying to walk something off. "You know what I'm tired of?" she said finally. "I'm tired of dirt." I blanked. "Dirt?" "Yes, dirt," she snapped. "Mud on the floor, dust in the air, cow smell in my clothes. I'm tired of this small life. This town where the biggest news is whose truck broke down. I am tired of pretending that this is enough for me." "That's not what I asked," I said quietly. "I'm tired of your simplicity, Eli," she continued, waving a hand like she was erasing me. "You're happy with coffee at the diner and a walk down Main Street in the same mountains every morning. I'm not. I want dinners in the city. I want culture. I want to talk to people who aren't discussing hay prices and cholesterol. So you're what? I said. Auditioning new husbands in Bozeman? She met my eyes then, and there it was, the look I'd been avoiding naming, contempt. Not a big dramatic flare-up. Just a steady simmer. I'm exploring my options, she said curtly. And I don't owe you a debrief on my social life. We're married, Mole, I said. You kind of do. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. We're legally entangled, she said. That's not the same thing as living. The conversation went downhill from there. There were words about sacrifice, I gave up my career for your little clinic, about obligation, these people suck the life out of you and never give it back, about ambition, I'm not going to die here, Eli, in some house that smells like Bengay. At some point, she threw in the line that would stick, I am tired of dirt and your simplicity. Dirt and my simplicity. We did not sleep in the same bed that night. I lay awake, listening to the wind whip snow against the window, and felt like someone had taken a scalpel to the version of my life I'd been carrying around and cut it open. The next day, she left for Bozeman again without saying when she'd be back. For a while, I drifted. I went to the clinic. I saw patients. I refilled prescriptions, checked wounds, listened to the same familiar lungs. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed when the old guys made their bad jokes, ate too many donuts from the bakery because they kept appearing on the counter and I didn't have the energy to resist. But when I went home at night, the house felt hollow. Too quiet. Too big. Half empty in the way a fridge is empty when all that's left is condiments. There was a stretch of days where I'd finish evening rounds, drive home, park in front of the house, and just sit in the truck with the engine off, watching my breath fog up the windshield, unable to make myself go inside. Then one evening, I made it as far as the front porch and stopped. The porch has always been my favorite part of the house. It faces west, out toward the mountains. On good days, the sunset makes them look like someone painted them by hand. On bad days, the clouds sit low and heavy, like the sky's thinking too hard. That night, there was snow on the ground and a colder kind of blue in the air. I sat down on the top step, still in my work boots and jacket, and just stared at those mountains. I thought about all the people I'd seen over the years. Farmers with backs ruined from lifting things they shouldn't, kids with broken bones and big dreams, women who'd buried husbands and sons and still showed up to volunteer at the school. People who stayed, even when it was hard. People who didn't have the luxury of deciding the town was too small because their lives were here, buried in the soil along with their roots. And I thought about Molly, whose absence was now louder than any argument we might have had. The wind bit at my face. My fingers went numb. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. I don't know how long I sat there, feeling the cold creep into my bones. Then a sentence floated up in my mind, clear as if someone had whispered in my ear, I heal people. It's time to heal myself. If I'd heard someone else say that, I'd have rolled my eyes. It sounded like something they'd put on a wellness blog with pictures of smooth rocks. But in that moment, it hit differently. I'd spent 2 decades patching up other people. Putting stitches where they were needed, setting bones, adjusting meds. I told countless patients, you can't ignore this, it'll only get worse. And here I was, ignoring the festering wound in my own life. That thought, call it my inner lion if you want, though I felt more like a frozen house cat, got me off the porch and back into the house, not to mope, but to dig. Our clinic is small, 3 exam rooms, a nurse's station, a waiting area with chairs that sigh when you sit down. The finances have always been tight, but manageable. Insurance reimbursements come late, ranchers pay in checks and occasionally beef, Medicare paperwork is its own special hell. I'd always trusted Molly with the books. She was good with numbers, good with QuickBooks, good at remembering which insurance rep to harass on which day. Don't worry about it, she'd say whenever I tried to look. I've got it under control. You just doctor. That line, in the new light of everything else, did not age well. The next morning, instead of going straight to see patients, I sat down at the ancient computer in the tiny office and logged into our clinic bank account. At first glance, it looked normal. Deposits from insurance, payments from patients, the usual outflow, supplies, utilities, staff salaries. But as I scrolled back through the months, a pattern started to emerge: regular transfers, every few weeks, to a separate account. Not huge amounts, the kind that don't raise red flags. 1,000 here, 1,500 there. Labeled innocuously, admin fee. Reimbursement. M. Turner expense. I clicked on one of them. The destination was an account at the same local bank where we kept our house mortgage. An account I did not remember opening. The blood roared in my ears. Now, I am not a forensic accountant. I am, however, quite familiar with slow bleeds. This looked like one. Over the next hour, between patients, I printed statements. I highlighted. I made a stack so thick it felt like a medical chart for an entire family. At lunch, instead of eating, I drove to the bank. Our branch is in a one-story brick building with fake columns out front that someone thought made it look respectable. Inside, there's carpet that's seen better decades and a smell of coffee and paper. "Morning, Doc," the teller said. "In or out?" "In," I said. "I need to talk to Mark, if he's around." Mark has been our banker since we arrived. He's my age, balding, with a calm demeanor that I used to envy. He's seen this town through foreclosures and windfalls, droughts and those random oil and gas booms that make everyone briefly insane. He ushered me into his office, closed the door, and said, "You look like you just told someone they can't eat bacon anymore." "I might be the patient this time," I said, dropping the stack of papers on his desk. He flipped through them, eyes narrowing. "That's the clinic account," he said. "Looks busy. Can you tell me where these transfers are going?" I asked, pointing to the recurring ones. He hesitated. "You know I can't just." "It's my clinic," I said. "I'm the owner. If there's an account I don't know about receiving funds from my business, that seems like something we should talk about." He studied my face, then the papers, then sighed. "Let me check something," he said, typing on his computer. After a moment, he turned the screen slightly, just enough that I could see without him technically divulging anything. There it was, an account ending in 7432. Name on it, Molly Turner. "Is she authorized on the clinic account?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She helps with the books." "Did you authorize regular transfers to her personal account as salary? Bonus? Reimbursement?" "No," I said. "I did not." He exhaled through his nose. "Eli," he said, "I can't give you more details without getting into some gray areas. But I can tell you that if someone with access has been moving funds in a way that doesn't match your understanding, you're right to be concerned." "Concerned," I repeated. "That's one word for it." He leaned back. "Look," he said, dropping the official tone. "Off the record? I've seen this kind of thing a few times. A little here, a little there. People tell themselves it's just temporary, that they'll pay it back, that they deserve it. Then it snowballs." "How much of a snowball are we talking?" I asked. He pointed at my stack. "Add up those transfers," he said. "Then triple it. Because those are just the ones you spotted." I did some math that made me wish I'd paid more attention in that part of med school. It wasn't millions. We're a clinic, not a hedge fund. But for a small practice hanging on by its fingernails, it was a serious hemorrhage. "You should talk to a lawyer," Mark said softly. "And probably the sheriff." "About my wife," I said. He nodded. "About whoever's been moving this money," he said carefully. "I hate to say it, Doc, but if this ever comes out and you've done nothing, they're going to look at you too." Small towns have a funny way of collapsing roles. He was my banker, my neighbor, and suddenly my conscience. On the drive back to the clinic, my mind ran through excuses on Molly's behalf. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd meant to set up a legit salary and forgot to tell me. Maybe she'd been using the money to pay some bills I didn't know about. Maybe. But the more I looked at the numbers, at the timing, at the way the amounts just skirted the thresholds for automatic scrutiny, the more one word came into focus: stealing. That night, when Molly called, I didn't pick up. When she texted, in Bozeman, staying at Sarah's, Roads are bad. I stared at the bank statements on the table and didn't reply. Instead, I did what I always tell my patients to do. I gathered information. I copied everything. I made notes of dates and amounts. I printed out the business registration for the clinic that had my name on it and the signature page that showed she was an authorized user, something I had agreed to when I still trusted the woman holding the pen. The next morning, I drove not to the clinic, but to the sheriff's office. Our sheriff, Jack, is a tall man with a mustache that could star in its own western. He's arrested half the town at one point or another, for DUIs, bar fights, the occasional creative interpretation of hunting season, but he's also the guy who organizes the Toys for Tots drive every December. We play poker once a month. He's seen me on good days and on the day I bawled in his truck after a bad outcome in the ER. He looked up when I walked in. "Doc," he said, "somebody wreck a snowmobile again?" "Not this time," I said. "Got a different kind of injury." I held up the folder. He invited me into his office, closed the door, and gestured for me to sit. "What am I looking at?" he asked. "Clinic bank records," I said. "Transfers to an account in my wife's name that I didn't know about. Regular, over the course of months." I talked to Mark at the bank. He raised some flags. Jack took his time flipping through the pages. The only sound was the clock on the wall and my own pulse in my ears. "Did you confront her?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not yet. I figured if I did, and she decided to clean house, I might lose evidence. Or she might spin it like I was trying to cover something up. And honestly, Jack, I don't trust myself to keep it calm." He nodded slowly. "You think she's been taking from the clinic account to what, fund her life in Bozeman?" he asked. "I don't know what she's doing with it," I said. "I just know it's leaving my patients' pockets and ending up in hers without my say-so." He slid the folder back to me. "You know what you're asking, right?" he said. "If I open a case, it's not a conversation. It's an investigation. There'll be questions. Papers. Maybe charges. And it'll be public, eventually. This isn't just talking to the sheriff as a friend. This is talking to law enforcement about your wife." "I know," I said. "But if I don't, then I'm part of it. And I can't be that. Not and look my patients in the eye. Not and look in the mirror." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "Leave the copies with me. I'll get our investigator to look at them. We'll need to subpoena the bank for full records. If they add up to what it looks like, we'll probably talk to the county attorney." He paused. "Once we start, Doc, there's no putting it back in the bottle." "I get it," I said. "Just do your job. I'll do mine." For a couple of weeks, life felt divided into two channels. On one channel, I was Doc as usual, treating, listening, joking about the weather, telling teenagers that no, that thing on their foot is not cancer. On the other channel, running underneath, was the quiet hum of an investigation. Occasional calls from Jack, "We're pulling more records. Need you to confirm this signature is yours or not," and the constant awareness that somewhere in Bozeman, Molly was going about her life, confident that whatever she'd been doing would, as she'd once said about everything, sort itself out. She called sometimes. Left voicemails. "Eli, we need to talk. You can't just shut down. Text ping, you're being childish. We're adults. Let's discuss this. You're not going to ruin my life over a few bank transfers." She came by the house once when I wasn't there. I know because she left a note on the kitchen table, "You're overreacting. I handled the money because you never wanted to. Stop being dramatic." It was almost funny. If she'd skimmed $20 once to pay for gas, I might have agreed. This was more. Eventually, the other shoe dropped. Jack called me into his office on a Tuesday. He had that look he gets when he has to tell someone their kid's been arrested. "We went through the records," he said without preamble. "It's not good. There's a clear pattern of funds being moved from the clinic's account to personal accounts, and then to various expenses in Bozeman, rent, dining, shopping. We're talking tens of thousands over the last year and a half." He slid a document across the desk, a summary from the county attorney's office. "They're calling it embezzlement and fraud," he said. Given the amounts and the time frame, the prosecutor is comfortable pursuing charges. They'd like your statement as the clinic owner, confirming you didn't authorize this and that Molly was acting without your knowledge. I stared at the word embezzlement like it was in a foreign language. It sounded so big. Corporate. Sleazy. Not something that belonged in the same sentence as my wife's name and our little clinic. "She's sure it'll all blow over," I said, voice dry. "She always is." Jack sighed. "Look, Eli," he said. "I know this is rough. If you want me off the case, I can ask the state to step in. You and I go back, and I don't want anybody saying I pushed this because of some vendetta. Or because you lost your cool." I shook my head. "I'd trust you," I said. "And if anyone asks, you can tell them I brought it to you, not the other way around. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because it's wrong." He nodded. "We'll bring her in," he said. "You don't have to be there." "I know," I said. "But I think I will be." The day they arrested Molly, the sky was ironically beautiful. Crisp blue, sun glinting off the snow, mountains sharp against the horizon. One of those days that makes people in postcards think rural life is always charming. I didn't watch the actual arrest. Jack insisted there was no need for that particular trauma. They picked her up in Bozeman, at the apartment she'd been renting for work convenience. She was brought back to our county, processed quietly, and arraigned in front of a judge who'd known us both for years. The news traveled fast, as it does here. By the time I finished afternoon clinic, people already knew. Some came in under flimsy pretenses just to check on me. Mrs. Lawson brought a pie and said, "I always thought she was too shiny for us." The high school principal patted my shoulder and said, "If you need anything, we got you." There were, of course, whispers. Humans love a story, especially when it's someone else's. "Did you hear? How much did she take? Was she cheating too?" I heard versions of those questions floating in the grocery store aisles. Molly, for her part, maintained her confidence as long as she could. She posted vaguely on social media about misunderstandings and unjust accusations. She called me from the jail phone once, furious. "How could you?" she demanded. "You stole from my patients," I said. "From the clinic. From the people who trusted us. What did you expect me to do?" "We built that place together," she said. "I deserve something for all the years I spent there." "You deserve a conversation, maybe," I replied. "You don't deserve secret accounts and forged memos." "This is going to make you look bad too," she said bitterly. "You think the law still love you when they know you let this happen?" "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. But I know what it would look like if I tried to hide it." There was a long pause. "You're such a martyr," she said finally, and hung up. The legal process churned on. She was formally charged with financial fraud and embezzlement. At some point, her lawyer struck a deal, plead to certain counts in exchange for others being dropped. There was talk of probation versus jail. I tried not to track every detail, it was too much like watching surgery on a relative. You know what's happening, but you don't really want to see the instruments. What I did have to deal with was the clinic. The damage to the account, combined with the mess of the investigation, meant keeping the doors open in that little building was like trying to keep a leaky boat afloat with a Dixie cup. Insurance companies don't love it when there's a fraud case attached to your mailing address. Grants got complicated. Vendors got skittish. There came a point where I had to make a hard choice, sink my remaining savings into patching up that specific place, with all its ghosts and associations, or cut ties, regroup, and try again somewhere else in town. I chose option 2. It felt like failure and freedom, both. We closed the original clinic quietly. Transferred records to a temporary setup in a spare wing of the community center. I kept seeing patients, couldn't imagine not, but I took some time to think about what I wanted the next chapter to look like. One evening, I sat on that same porch, looking at those same mountains, a cup of coffee turning cold in my hands. The worst of the storm had passed. Molly was out of my daily orbit, entangled in the justice system and her own choices. The town still waved when I drove by. Kids still rode bikes down the street. Mrs. Jensen still yelled at me for not wearing a hat. I realized that, For all the turmoil, one thing hadn't changed: this was still my home. These people were still my people, in the way a doctor can claim that. They hadn't left. They'd stayed. And so had I. Sometimes, when you lose something big, it makes room for an idea that's been waiting. Mine showed up in the form of an old building on the edge of town, a squat, ugly structure that used to be a small engine repair shop. The roof was mostly good. The plumbing was present. The landlord was desperate and willing to negotiate. I walked through it with Tyler, my nurse, who'd stuck with me through everything. "You sure about this, Doc?" he asked, stepping around an oil stain. "Nope," I said. "But I'm sure I'm not done. People still need a place to bring their weird rashes." We gutted it. We painted. We begged for deals on used exam tables and refurbished equipment. The town showed up, like they always do when something needs doing. The high school shop class built us cabinets. The hardware store gave us a discount on everything. Neighbors brought sandwiches. When it came time to hang a sign, I hesitated. Turner Family Medicine didn't feel quite right anymore. This wasn't just about me. And if I'm honest, the word family was a little tender. One evening, scribbling on a notepad at the kitchen table, the phrase came to me as simple and obvious as a stethoscope: for those who stayed. Because that's who it was for. The ranchers who kept ranching through droughts and recessions. The teachers who kept teaching with shrinking budgets. The kids who went off to college and came back anyway. The ones who didn't bail when things got hard or boring or, yes, dirty. I called up a local sign maker, a guy who usually does no trespassing placards and motorcycle decals, and asked him to try his hand at something a little different. A week later, we stood out front as he bolted the sign above the door, a simple wooden board, hand-painted, with 2 lines. Eli Turner, M.D. For those who stayed. Tyler crossed his arms, tilted his head, and said, "It's a little on the nose, Doc." "Good," I said. "People in this town don't have time for subtle." We opened on a Monday. No ribbon cutting, no speeches, no PR. Just "Hey, we're open" notice on the town Facebook page and a piece of paper taped in the diner window. By 9 a.m. the waiting room had 3 people in it. By noon, we were running behind. It felt normal. Patients came. They brought their kids, their aches, their worries. Some hesitated at the door, maybe unsure if they were stepping into drama. But most walked in like they always had and said, "Hey, Doc, and nice place, and when are you going to get some real chairs?" Sometimes, someone will bring up Molly. "Such a shame," they'll say. "She always seems so put together." "Yeah," I'll reply. "She did." They'll look at me like they're waiting for more. I'll shrug. "People make choices," I say. "I'm just trying to keep everybody's blood pressure under control." On really cold nights, when the roads are quiet and the clinic's dark, I'll drive by and look at that sign. For those who stayed. It makes me smile. Not a big, movie kind of smile. Just a small, satisfied one. Because for all the ways my life took a turn I did not see coming, for all the pain and embarrassment and legalese, it also brought me here, to a place where I know exactly who I'm working for and why. If you're waiting for the part where I say I'm glad it all happened, I'm not quite there. I wouldn't wish that particular brand of betrayal on anyone. Learning your wife's been cheating on you is one thing. Learning she's been stealing from your clinic on top of it is efficient, I suppose, but rough. But I can say this: I can sit on my porch now, look at those mountains, and feel more whole than I did when I was pretending not to see the cracks. I can laugh, a little, at the image of myself as the oblivious country doctor, and at the fact that it took bank statements and a sheriff to make me take my own advice. Listen to your symptoms, I tell patients. Early is better than late. I failed that test in my own life once. I'm trying not to again. So yeah. I heal people. That's my job. But somewhere along the way, I figured out that I need healing too. And as corny as it sounds, this town, these people, these stubborn, muddy, mountain-shadowed folks who stayed, have a way of doing that just by showing up. Besides, out here, the stars really are bigger. And the coffee's still terrible. But it's ours. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.